Women make up 36% of the tech workforce in India, and about 19% are in leadership roles. So, some green shoots, but much remains to be done. What is your perspective? Where are the gaps?
It's great to say that there are great numbers at the start. It drops to 8% at the super senior leadership.
How do we fight the cultural, social issues that are there?
On one side, you have the struggle of people internalizing that they're not good at it. And the other side, the way it's taught is already exclusive. But there's such a huge gap, but because that kind of overhaul really needs almost rebellious takeover.
Somewhere, I think this rebelliousness, this I will not have it any other way, I think has to come from women much more.
This is years of conditioning. You're growing up being rewarded for being compliant. India is going to see a lot more single women in its 30s.
We talk about pay gap being a huge issue for women.
An American research paper which says that for every child that a man has, he gains 4 to 6% of salary. For every child a woman has, she loses 5 to 7% of the salary.
DEI has become an abusive language. I mean, it's something which is spoken in hushed tones and nobody wants to talk about it.
What am I trying to say about mentorship, DEI, and the politics of all of this? People that are oppressed themselves by the oppressor will put the oppressor in power.
Joining me today is Shreya Krishnan, Managing Director India of AnitaB.org. Hello and welcome to What India Needs podcast with me, Shutapa Paul. Women make up 36% of the tech workforce in India, and about 19% are in leadership roles. You may ask, how does it matter if there are fewer women in STEM if they are adequately represented in other sectors? Well, it does, because inclusive workspaces have a direct correlation with innovation. Disproportionate representation, on the other hand, creates blind spots that completely ignore the female population. This has a bearing in tool design, clinical trial, and maybe even consumption patterns. Joining me today is Shreya Krishnan, Managing Director India of AnitaB.org, a global nonprofit that works towards advancing women and non binary individuals in the tech industry. Thank you for joining us, Shreya. Shreya, thank you so much for coming on What India Needs podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we have a very exciting topic, and women in tech. Of course, there is we see an increase. We say there are about 36% women in the Indian tech force.
Yes.
Having said that, some numbers keep changing. More contractual workers coming in. Better representation in GCCs as per team leads. These
Yes.
reports that come out. So some green shoots, but much remains to be done. What is your perspective? Where are the gaps?
So the reflection of anything that is actual, applaudable equity is when you have absolute balance in leadership. So we're very far from that. It's great to say that there are great numbers at the start because, of course, there are so many graduates coming out, they are getting jobs. But what happens to them 5 years later?
Mm.
There is a drastic dip. The minute women get married, they drop off the workforce. The minute women have children, they drop off the workforce. And where does that impact lead us? It leads us to understand the fact that your societies and your families play a far more important role in shaping your ideas of what your career should look like or what you choose to want it to be for it to actually inform the way it goes. And in India, we're still struggling with that representation. It drops to 8% at the super senior leadership.
Wow.
Right? So it's a gradual decrease. 36% goes down to 24, 24 goes down to 14 at the VP level, and then down to an 8,
Wow.
which again keeps changing, of course. But the few and far between that we have makes us seem like we've progressed a lot. But that's natural because there is a change that's happening. But what can we do to really, cover the gaps and level the field? There's a lot more to go. We're 139th on the Global Equity Index.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a long, long way to go. And it's important for us to recognize that it's also to do a lot with the kind of societal structures that we have.
Yeah. I think social and mental taboos, some of them are also inbuilt. I
Yes.
think women themselves
Internalized.
internalize it and then they kind of bring it into practice. Obviously, leadership, we need more women on
Mm.
top in all sectors. But with tech, it becomes very important. In STEM, for example,
Yes,
more specifically,
absolutely.
very important because there are biases that otherwise come in if there are no women to, help shape those decisions. So, how do we fight the cultural, social issues that are there, which is stopping this progress? Let's retain more women.
I think the fundamental work that needs to be done is at the academia level, right?
Hmm.
Our Indian academic structure does not allow for things like resilience or dealing with failure to be taught,
Hmm.
right? We're also very conditioned about the kind of gender roles that we assign to students in school, for instance. And it's so deeply intrinsic that
Hmm.
by the time a student is out of school, he or she has internalized their gender normative conditioning so deeply that they're unable to fight it. So the work is on two prongs. One is how do you educate them? How do you create a family environment that teaches them to be well equipped for life, right? Because it also leads to a lot of the other statistics in the social strata that's coming up around divorce, around relationships, around manosphere. And you see a lot of
Yeah.
these conversations. So they're all interconnected. So, one of the ways to really work on this is to work with individuals at their level, to allow them to understand their capacity, their choice, their interests, and to really make learning and this cohesive environment of holistic community based ideas of what learning should look like
Hmm.
should be so much more real and accessible, which it's not. Right now we're still doing the same competitive rat race that you and I were put together.
Yeah.
Not much has changed, it's just changed in form, but in terms of structure it's still the same.
Hmm.
Today, children have more options of careers,
Hmm.
but how are they looking at their careers?
Yeah.
Right? Students have more access to a lot of information, but what has really changed in the way the rest of their life looks, especially with the AI disruption that you're seeing right now? I think it's so important to go into the human
Hmm.
so much more deeper because there is where the magic can happen. It
Right.
is at the individual level, it is at the classroom level, it is at the family level and the home level. Because until you change that, you're not going to be able to change corporate boardrooms. They're a reflection of the society.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned education, and that obviously is very important because
Yeah.
a lot of the mind shift, the gender roles that we are kind of forced into, as you mentioned correctly, happens at early stages of our lives. First at
Yeah.
home, then in schools and colleges. When we look at AI now, there is India's leading in its adoption. I mean, I think we every day there's a new app. Everyone is using AI like
Yeah.
nobody's business. I mean, even in my team,
Yeah.
there is so much of AI being used that I've stopped fighting it. I'm like, can you humanize it, please? But don't copy paste, but leverage it.
Yeah.
But when we look at academia, now these are numbers. Gen AI course enrollments.
Yes.
Um, Women in India are still, the percentage
Fewer.
is not very strong compared to men. Better than global rates, but then, still not very strong. It's at about 29.6%.
Yeah.
At the same time, for engineering degrees, also we see lesser and lesser women. And the numbers are so more women are enrolling for graduate
Yes.
courses and post graduation, but not in engineering. So somewhere STEM is like a let's not touch that. What is your perception? What have you learned when you all talk about these
You
things?
say, it's an interesting thing because there were more STEM students back in the day that were women in comparison to those choosing STEM now.
Right.
It also comes from a deeply intrinsic idea that girls aren't good at math, right?
Hmm.
Science is not for girls.
Hmm.
There is that perception that you're built and raised at home. And there are people who are told that you just need to know enough maths to do grocery bills,
Hmm.
right? Which is a certain perception that a lot of people carry.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, you're not good at math. But the point is, what we don't recognize is it's so deeply ingrained in the educators that it
As
gets
well.
passed on
Yeah.
to the students, right? Engaging with math, engaging with science in a way that it's built for everybody would
Hmm.
be so different versus the way it's built right now.
Hmm.
Also, the science that we are learning and the maths that we are learning is a very um, skewed idea of what it could actually potentially be,
Mm.
right? When we're talking about science and maths, the curriculum that is versus what you can actually learn from science and your engagement with plants or animals or the world around you or the planet is so vastly different.
Mm.
And the way that is designed is not exactly conducive either. So there is both, right? On one side, you have the struggle of people internalizing that they're not good at it. On the other
Mm.
side, the way it's taught is
Yeah.
already exclusive.
So how do we change this? Because you mentioned, say, the time that when we were in school, I remember like my teachers would kind of force us, if you had good marks, they would try to force us into science, even though we were not interested. But there was a perception, at least in Calcutta, where I'm from, where it's like if you have good marks, the first thing you try to do is science. If that has changed now, 20, 25 years or 30 years later, if that has changed, that means the educator needs education and educating,
Yeah.
so to speak.
And if you look at school curriculums, they haven't changed much,
Yeah.
right? In the way things are taught and the way things are expected to be, regurgitated.
Hmm.
If you're talking about the AI world in such intensity, what have we done with our education system to equip people who are coming out into the AI world? Right? Other than teaching them shortcuts to use AI to write essays,
Yeah.
what have we really taught them about human thinking, about perception, about empathy, compassion, about responsibility? There is so much that we have to teach, but there's such a huge gap. But because that kind of overhaul really needs a very almost rebellious takeover,
Yeah.
you know,
Of the education system.
of all the
Of
systems,
yeah.
of all the culturally nuanced systems of complex power equations that have led us to be in the world that we're in today,
Hmm.
which is clearly not serving anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except a very few
Small,
small
the
overprivileged,
2% that
yeah,
will always make it,
community.
irrespective of what happens to the rest of the
Yeah.
world.
So, talk about COVID-19, of course, watershed moment for everybody, personally, professionally, in India, also overseas. But where women in tech are concerned, now these are again reports that I've read where, they say that it's had a positive impact. COVID-19 had a negative impact on women, set us back
Yeah,
career wise in various sectors. But for tech, because it was work from home, there was
yeah.
remote work, even today, flexibility is there. It had a positive impact on women in tech. What did you see? What did you
So,
gauge?
COVID-19 brought up a very interesting aspect of remote working with absolute, freedom to sort of decide on hours and things like that. And that is fantastic, because it equips women with agency to choose the way they want to engage with work, right? When COVID finished and offices started calling people to back to work, there was a drastic drop in women representation in the tech workforce. The minute you started bringing people back in, because unfortunately women have the mental load of home, families, children, elder care, and it's different at different segments of life, right? People could want gaps for various reasons.
Yeah,
And I think the fact that our childcare system is not well balanced, the fact that our healthcare system doesn't support women in the way it should, and the fact that, the demands that we have, especially in our society and culture, of course, all over the world, patriarchy, misogyny, all of that. But in India, the load is that much more
yeah,
because of the size of families, etc. And what happened as we progressed, we also became capitalist in nature.
yeah,
We
yeah,
became nuclear families from the communities that we grew up in or
yeah,
the neighborhoods that we grew up in that were safer. So the entire structure of this is very detrimental to women's careers.
yeah,
And that's the decline that you're seeing. And that's also the sort of anger and rage that's coming up that you see in small pockets.
yeah.
It's not coming up in a very big way,
Not in a big way.
although it's advertised like it's,
Yeah,
like women are getting out of
yeah,
hand and there's all of this need for power and
yeah,
control. But that's because of the sheer understanding of the fact that the status quo is being questioned,
yeah,
right? India is going to see a lot more single women in its 30s.
yeah,
It is going to choose to be, a lot more independent as women in the structure that they're given. And that's because when you equip a woman with financial independence, like there's this beautiful line that I think a minister said somewhere, which says that patriarchy crumbles for a woman with a certain amount of, financial independence.
Yeah.
So there's a particular number or amount of money that once a woman has, patriarchy doesn't limit her
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. What I see, and this is a very practical observation, because I do write and about this, and I in whatever small ways that we can, we also try to practice what we
Yeah,
preach.
yeah,
Somewhere I think this rebelliousness, this
yeah,
I will not have it any other way, I think has to come from women much more. Where, I mean, I have seen very rebellious young ladies getting married and then suddenly towing the line.
yeah,
When it comes between choosing career and family, they'll always choose the family. I'm not saying you don't choose the family, but there is a
yeah,
balance which a male candidate or a male employee seems to have, it's ingrained in them. While with women we always have these conversations, where I think a few of them, I see them as demanding. They're like, I want to keep my career, so I'll make it work. But others will be like, I'm already choosing to step off
yeah,
because that for me is expected. So in their mind, it's an unconscious bias in their own mind.
yeah.
So that rebelliousness, that I will not have it any other way, that has to come in. How do we have that?
That happens when, like I said, you equip them with agency. This is years of conditioning. You're growing up being rewarded for being compliant. You're growing up being applauded for showing up for everybody but yourself. When you erode the self of the woman in selfless, sort of this superwoman idea of her getting her work done and children and home, you're putting an immense amount of pressure
Yeah.
and you're rewarding that.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the cycle that we're perpetuating. So what are we rewarding? What are we punishing? We're punishing women with, there's numbers and stats to prove this. 98% of relationships where the woman earns more than the man end up in divorce marriages, right? So
Hmm.
so you are constantly punishing women who are successful,
Yeah.
right? And then you're rewarding women who are willing to forego their ambition
Yeah.
to create an environment that is safe and secure, and this whole idea of this nurturing. But I'm sorry, that should be for all humans.
Yeah.
Nurturing and compassion and empathy
Hmm.
should not be the load that's put on one gender,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
problems are everybody's.
Yeah.
Patriarchy is as detrimental to men as it is to women, right? Every time we speak about it, the assumption is, oh, this is man hating. No, it's not. Do you
Hmm.
recognize how detrimental it is to men to
Themselves. Yeah.
already constantly be the provider, the
Yeah.
protector, and put themselves in that
Yeah.
space? It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd that we equip a gender entirely on one side of the spectrum and put the other on the other end.
Yeah.
And then you're expecting them to come together and somehow find balance. The balance is not outside, the balance is within.
Yeah.
We all have the masculine and the feminine. They are
Yeah.
traits that you can access, and they're archetypes that you can be, which means that your agency is higher, that your ability to perform is more, your ability to really function in this world is so much better when you're able to access that entire range of what's
Yeah.
available to you.
Yeah.
Instead of sidelining it and saying, this is masculine, this is feminine, hence
Yeah.
you can't be one or the other.
I mean, you said it so well, and thank you for saying that. The reason we have these conversations is because I want more and more people to hear from people like you as well. Um, it can be a team.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a man, woman, or even other genders. I mean, it's a team. You're
Yes.
you're together. You're doing things, and you can have roles which can be flexible. They can be seasonal as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of pressure to put on women to play the mother, the maternal
Yeah.
instinct all the time, and a lot of pressure on men as well to be that constant breadwinner, irrespective of job loss. I mean, it could be depression, it could be health issues.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure, and I think, I mean, the happiest people I see are people who don't believe in these things.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm earning more than my partner, and that's fine. And maybe I've quit working and now my partner's working and I'm taking a break or I'm taking care of kids or whatever. It's a very
Yeah.
mutual decision making where you're respecting each other and working together as a team. um when we talk about, obviously, finances are very important, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about pay gap being a huge issue for women.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, small business owner, I can tell you that pay gap affects even the entrepreneur,
Of course.
because what we get paid, I think a male entrepreneur would probably
Of
getting
course.
much more. And these are things that are subtly, coming out. And obviously salaries have always been an issue. How is it for women in tech? We understand things, I mean, there is an obvious pay gap there as well.
Of course, there is.
Would you tell us a bit more?
So there is a pay gap that exists that starts at around 20% or lower, depending on organization. Some organizations try and reduce that percentile. Some organizations are really great at sort of making sure that it's the pay scale is level, right? Now there are more nuances to this. So
Mm.
it starts at about 5-10% in the more mature organizations, all the way up to 60-70% in certain organizations is the differential,
Wow.
right? And that's crazy. It's also crazy to note, and we don't have Indian research on this. This is an American research paper which says that for every child that a man has, he gains 4 to 6% of salary. For every child a woman has, she loses 5 to 7% of her salary.
Wow.
So that means, as a man, when you become a father, you're rewarded in pay scale, right? But as a mother, you're actually punished
Wow.
because you're suddenly assumed, and it's a bias, that the woman is not going to be as involved because now you've put the burden of the child on the woman.
Right.
Not only have we designed a very unequal world, inequitable world, we reward it constantly. And that's such a problem, right? Because the minute you think about a CXO level salary, and it's also proven pay gaps are also relating to performance
Yeah.
deeply,
Yeah.
right? Because it's related to promotions, it's related to jobs you take up. Women CEOs will often take up jobs that a man CEO would never,
Mm.
right? If you look at the Yahoo CEO when she stepped in, or if you look at global CEOs that have stepped in,
Mm.
women
Mm.
have stepped in when company is in a massive amount of trouble and turmoil,
Yeah.
right? Because they feel at least then that's when they'll get the opportunity. Men would never do that. They'll wait for the next best option
Yeah.
to come up, right? It's also how women apply for jobs, right? We will apply only if there's a 90 to 100% match on the job description and our experience. Men will apply if there's a 40% match.
Mm. Yeah.
That's the difference. And until and unless we speak about this, this is happening around us every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Until and unless we make ourselves aware that every product we buy has bias in it and gendered bias in it.
Yeah.
Every relationship that we are building with the world around us is built on our ideas of conditioning and bias we have acquired. We will constantly continue to perpetuate it because it's
Yeah.
comfortable, it's
Yeah.
easy. And it also informs all of the other structures of capitalism and patriarchy and traditional forms of religion and all of that.
All of that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it upholds this structure very, very comfortably. And when
Yeah.
you're shaking the structure, you're obviously going to be questioned
Yeah.
or you're going to be ostracized.
Yeah. And I think performance is something very interesting that you mentioned,
Yeah.
because we hear the about, women who, even after, say, they've taken a break because of maternity, they've gone back to work, their performance is
Higher.
is is higher, and they've not been rewarded for it. But at the same time, I've also heard stories, and yes, they've come from male bosses who've said that, the performance has not been good enough. Like, it's not been before pregnancy, it's subpar, but we are too scared, we can't let
Yeah,
go of
I
the
keep saying
person.
this, right? My uterus and my brain are not connected. The fact that I'm a lactating mother and the fact that I'm a working person are not connected,
Yeah.
right? And I find this really annoying. Countries in the world that had women leading through COVID saw better economic stability, lower death rates, better health management systems, and better management overall,
Mm.
right? Women entrepreneurs who take funding and loans are seen to perform better, pay
Better.
back better,
Mm.
they're better pay masters, all of it. But they get that much lower funding,
Yeah.
right? Women at the top leading companies tend to perform better, have more, equitability, have more productivity, profitability, all of that. There are numbers to prove all of this, right?
Yeah.
But still, we will choose our bias
Yeah.
over what statistics is constantly telling us. we will choose to feed our bias over data, numbers, statistics, economics,
Yeah.
because it feeds a certain larger purpose of keeping this perpetuating
Yeah.
crap that we have.
It's the same thing. Like you keep people, if you keep the masses hungry and poor,
Yeah,
that's also kind of politics.
it
This is
is.
also kind of
Of course it
politics
is.
as well.
It's entirely politics because you will see the play out around you.
Yeah.
It's not it's not a surprise that the manosphere is a conversation today.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise that psychologically there are young boys who have believed that the regressive ideas of what they uphold women to are the only way to be. There are people putting up posts like the only way to fix this issue is to attach a woman to a man who's responsible for her for everything,
Mm.
right? And it is not a surprise that there are countries that go where women are saying we're not going to get married, we're not going to have children,
Yeah.
and it is a rebellion,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's what we've brought the world to.
Yeah.
It's not a binary. Gender is not binary. It's a spectrum. The world has to recognize that. And as long as we want to constantly keep in cahoots with this binary, we're going to suffer.
Yeah. And also, individually, we tend to take the rotten examples and make entire reports and
Of
case
course.
studies out of them. There will always be people on all sides of the spectrum who are not the people that we are talking about. Here we are talking about generally deserving, truly ambitious,
Yeah.
and people who want to have a career as well.
Yeah.
So today it's a very strange world, especially with Trump. DEI has become an abusive language. I mean, it's something which is spoken in hushed tones, and
Tones.
nobody wants to talk about it, especially companies who have a global exposure. I've actually had chats with some of our client partners who are like, we don't want to talk too much about DEI because we'll do it quietly because we want to do the right thing. But it's a dangerous world out there. How do you keep how do you keep it still going? How do you keep the conversation still going? And how does mentorship also help? I'd like to club both.
So I think I will lean in from your previous answer of as entrepreneurs you earn lesser, and these percentages are always up against arms with what actually eventually happens. And I will then come to this question. So there are about only about 1% of fake rape cases,
Mm.
but the minute there's one fake rape case, all of
All
it is
over.
seen
Yeah.
as fake, right? Women are lying.
Yeah.
There's usually one act of violence that a woman does, and suddenly, or a man has killed himself,
Yeah.
and suddenly the entire 98% is ignored. There are similar angles to it, right? Nobody is ever, like the dowry alimony
Yeah.
conversation,
Mm.
nobody's ever been burnt to death over alimony, but look at the number of deaths and suicides that happen over dowry even today,
Yeah.
right?
As recently
As
as
today.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So, for instance, when we are doing this thing of, pitting numbers against each other, um, the thing about this is not, inclusion is not a strategy, right? It just is.
Mm.
It's strategic, yes, if you want to use it to improve productivity, have a diverse team, all of it. But the world, what does it need in this moment that we're in, with the climate change that we have, with the wars that are going on? What do we need in the moment? We need people to be allowed to be themselves, to be celebrated for who they are, to be able to use their voices and their agencies to do right by the world. And right is, of course, a very skewed idea because
Yeah.
depends on where you're standing on
Yeah.
what is right.
Yeah.
But to do and be seen, heard, held. What does somebody need in this moment, right? With AI becoming the way it is, AI is absorbing all of the biases of the data that we've
Absolutely.
fed into it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That shows you it's a mirror. If AI doesn't teach the world today that it's such a deep mirror of the deep, dark, irresponsible things that we've done, and we
Mm.
don't learn now, the problems we'll grapple with are far more complex than just climate change at this
Yeah.
moment and no water in our cities,
Yeah.
right? And we're pushing the world to that brink. And I love this, when we say, oh, people have done this to the planet. No, indigenous cultures have not. The
Mhm.
Amazonian people who live in the Amazonian jungle worship the jungle,
Yeah.
right? So, what am I trying to say about mentorship, DEI, and the politics of all of this?
Mm.
Is there is a certain keep the masses hungry story
Yeah.
that keeps perpetuating, because then when you're able to tell that story in that form and manner, when you make it about, oh, this is what it is, then people that are oppressed themselves by the oppressor will put the oppressor in power,
Yeah, yeah. It
right?
it is a kind of another kind of conditioning as well,
Yeah,
right? But when you've donned many roles, right?
yeah.
Corporate life, activism, arts. How have these experiences shaped your vision of inclusive workspaces, particularly with, tech, which is now where you're most active?
Yeah. So I believe that intersectionality is one of the most beautiful things you can gift yourself,
Mm,
right? Intersections of your upbringing, of the geographies that you're in, of the experiences that you've had, intersections of the learning that you've had. One is never independent of the other, right? How I show up on the dance floor is how I will show up in the boardroom. Right? My commitment to it, my presence, all of it,
right.
right? Who you are as a person spills over into everything that you choose to do. And I think bringing the mentorship conversation there, I have seen some of the most incredible people in the world being so humble, so real, so
Mm,
true to their honesty and their presence. And that's all it is. And, my NLP guide says that if your presence is the only thing you bring, make sure that it's a gift
right.
to the other person.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I think there's so much that can be unlocked in the conversation of technology, of presence. When you build technology that's present to the people it's being built for, will be far more responsible, right? When AI is built for people that it's meant to be built for, and not leaving people out there because they don't have access or they don't have a seat at the table, we're continuing to perpetuate the conditioning. So technology is only as inclusive as the people that are creating it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the technology, I mean, before you came in, we were just having a chat, and I was just talking about how most of the times we've accepted how certain tools are, how certain things today maybe in the last 5, 10 years, we've been talking about making things more accessible to differently abled people,
Yeah.
but we never spoke about making things accessible for women even
Yeah.
before that, because a
Yeah.
lot of things are not built or designed for us. They don't cater to us. Today there is, now suddenly there's a flip. There's a lot of things being spoken about women protein needs, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
It's like a sudden epiphany
Burst.
somebody's had, that because they've realized that women are very strong consumers. They are the ones who are
Yeah.
making decisions in
Yeah.
a family. We are the ones who are buying stuff for everybody, and also for ourselves. So a lot of what is happening today is being driven by consumerism. As long as it's having a good
Impact.
impact, we're okay with it. But definitely the fact is that there are decades of this kind of
Yeah. And
bias.
what is built over something that's already built will absorb the bias of the old
Yeah,
version.
unless we break it and
Yeah.
shatter it.
Right. Cars are not designed for women. More women die in car crashes because they're just not safe for women, because
Yeah.
they've not been tested with women drivers, etc. The dummies, the weights of the dummies, all of that. The
Mm.
same with US FDA approved drugs.
Yeah.
They're mostly tried and tested on white males
Yeah.
who are a certain size. So even the African American origin males are not really impacted the same way by the medication as their counterparts are.
Right.
So imagine black women, imagine Hispanic women,
Yeah.
imagine all of the other races,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So there's an entire perpetuation of the healthcare culture that just believes that what's tested on a few should be okay for
Yeah.
everyone. It's not true.
Yeah.
All our
I
bodies
wonder
are
if that's
unique.
changed now.
It's not entirely changed. Even today, women go into hospitals with pain, which is the same level as that as men, and they are sent back home saying, "You'll be fine, it's just pain."
Yeah.
Whereas men are given opiates for the same amount of pain that women are in,
Yeah.
right? So it's still structured, like I said, until you break that structure.
Yeah.
Firstly, we have to recognize that it's not one shoe fits all. And that's the idea of equity. When we talk about equity, it's about going to a bowling alley and finding a shoe size that fits your shoe,
Absolutely. Even
fits
something
your
as
leg.
small as that
Yeah,
is so
that's
significant.
equity.
Yeah.
So, how can I find that in a healthcare system? How can I find that in an education system? How does my intersections of my identity belong in the spaces in the boardrooms that I occupy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? How can I be all of me
Yeah.
and still be seen for who I am without biases
Yeah.
and without having to fight? I think that's
Constantly.
the exhaustion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boardrooms, bedrooms,
Yeah.
and public spaces. I think most of the times we are fighting.
Yeah.
Uh, the ones who are fighting are very exhausted,
Yeah.
and the ones who haven't fought, they are just jaded, and they've accepted the lot. But interesting, you mentioned about equity. You've written a book called Words Matter,
Yeah.
um, and then where you've spoken about redefining the language of equality and what kind of words leaders should use in a workspace. So give us some instances of that and tell us a bit about your book.
So, Jacinta and I, who's my co author, worked in this space for a long time. And then we realized that language is inherently biased,
Yeah.
right? When you have the idea of who a strong woman is, there's a certain perception we've built, right? With professions, think of an engineer, think of a nurse, think of a doctor. We already have visuals that are so deeply ingrained in us of what gender one profession or the other belongs. So language is inherently
Mm.
biased, which means we need to reframe language to create inclusive spaces that does not allow us to judge somebody based on the labels that we're sticking on
Yeah.
them. So the book is a compilation of 40 words that's speaking to the reader. So ambition is telling the reader that, oh, I apparently mean different things to different genders. An ambitious woman is not the same as an ambitious man.
Mm.
There is a certain flavor, texture, nuance, positive, negative thinking that's associated to the identity of who I am as
Yeah.
ambition. And so it's basically words speaking to the reader saying, one, it's equipping the reader with that break in the internalized ideas that we have
All
of what
right.
that language is to ourselves. And two is for the others that are reading it, how do you create more equitable language to start with?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you bring everybody to the table?
Absolutely. I mean, I dream of a world very soon. I mean, it's not a utopian dream, it's a very practical thing when you say an ambitious woman and it is not a slur.
Yeah.
You say an ambitious woman and it doesn't mean the woman is not marriage material. You say
Yeah.
an ambitious woman, it means, oh, she doesn't have maternal instincts. A lot of these things,
Can coexist easily, seamlessly,
absolutely.
absolutely
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. And why shouldn't
Yeah.
they? So definitely. I mean, I just hope that a lot of people start imbibing this in their daily lives, language,
Yeah.
practice, because when we think about shattering the glass ceiling, I say, before you reach the glass ceiling, even look at your floor,
Yeah.
look at your eye level. I mean, what's happening around you and shatter that, even in our small conversations, like maybe with our domestic help
Yeah.
who has a lot of bias that she's working through much more than us.
Yeah.
We are privileged, most of us are privileged. But just being able to have those conversations and in our own way, do it in the small ways, and then someday that drop of every drop counts, right? So
Yes.
um that brings me to anitap.org. Tell us a bit about how y'all are working to advance women and non binary individuals in tech, a bit about your programs, a bit about the vision that you have.
So for us, I think it's about STEM learning,
Yeah.
right? That's where it starts.
Hmm.
Because technology for humans is technology that's built by everybody, right? Technology that is cohesive and holistic in its approach. So at Anita B, we look at sort of working right from academia and schools and STEM education for young girls to sort of colleges that are bringing these graduates out to early career, mid career, senior career. So we work across different spectrums of the lives of women in technology. We also work with academia, we work with ecosystem partners, which are all our collaborative, not for profit and for profit organizations that we work with. We also work with community, which is the individuals themselves, which
Yeah.
is the women. So we have a community of 11,000 plus women in
Wow.
India and it's growing. So we sort of have learning for them, tech, non-tech, spaces for them to come meet, speak. We also have listening circles. When when the RG car incident happened, our community came together to just speak about their stories because it's so triggering. We don't
Yeah.
have safe, non-judgmental spaces where we can talk about the experiences we've had, and it's so enriching to see some of these. It's not the jobs we assign to women. It's not the doors we open for them, but it's conversations that we have that changes the mindset intrinsically. I think that are our wins. I think that's where the magic lies, right? To be able to make somebody think that they can do better and be the best version of themselves without limiting themselves to the beliefs that they've ingrained. I think that's the magic that I love about Anita B. But of course, we work with corporates and we do training programs around bias and, sexual harassment and what have you. We also have apprenticeship pathway programs where
Right.
young students are identified who are potential and then, partnered with organizations for a year where they undergo training and then they're absorbed as management trainees by the organizations. So there's a whole bunch of returnship programs, a plethora of things that we do. But like I said, I think in everything we do, we want to equip our people that we touch
Mm.
with a better experience of life for themselves through
Wonderful.
technology.
Wonderfully put. Shreya, thank you so much. I love your insights. I just have some quick
Sure.
questions that we will end this chat with. How does the year look for gender parity as far as India is concerned? 123 years away from gender parity. How does this year look for you? What do you see
This year's
happening?
hard. This year's hard because we are unfortunately deeply connected to the larger geopolitics of the world,
Yeah.
and that set us back. So next year the number will be lower up, lower down from where I stand and see it because I know how much of a struggle it's been for us this year
Yeah.
to do the work that we're doing. And we need all of the gumption and all of the grit to continue.
Absolutely, and I think it's across sectors also.
Yeah.
This knockdown effect that we will all of us will
Yeah.
feel. Name one policy that every company should adopt to ensure equity.
I think to really look at people for who they are and not their genders, irrespective of gender, irrespective of disability. I think the wholeness of the person. If you can see that, you can see what they're capable of doing.
Thanks so much, Shreya. Wonderful having you on What India Needs podcast, and I hope you had a great experience here with us as well.
Absolutely. I think what a lovely conversation. I just realized that, I felt so seamless in the conversation that we just had. And I love the fact that it's called What India Needs because I think all of us need to take a moment and think of what each one of us can do to fit that need. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much. Great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on What India Needs podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you have any comments, leave them below. Thank you and see you next time.